I'm still waiting for someone to tell me what is the fair share. Is that 20%, 40%, 60%, 80, any number? Or even to give me some principle by which you might determine. And really, it reminds me of the old question asked to Samuel Gompers, the legendary labor leader, when he said, what does organized labor want? And he said in one word, more. And when they say fair share, they mean more. That's all they mean.
And what makes them tremendously dangerous is that facts that contradict what they believe are simply ignored or evaded.
Welcome to the Thomas Sowell channel. Today we're going to talk about billionaires, AOC, and New York tax revenue. What is a billionaire's fair share? More. And that will always be AOC's answer, because politicians will always be looking for new ways to buy votes with other people's money. Let's watch a brief clip from AOC explaining the need for a billionaire wealth tax.
Did you know that there are 118 billionaires right here in New York? Not in the United States, not in the world, in New York.
And there's no reason why working families in New York State, one of the richest states in this country, should be in so much need of basic necessities when we have the largest concentration of billionaires in the entire world.
Governor Cuomo, we need you to pass a billionaire's tax in order to make sure that we're providing for our working families. It's time to stop protecting billionaires, and it's time to start working for working families.
AOC is right for once. New York does have the highest per capita number of billionaires anywhere on Earth, and there's a reason for that. New York is arguably the greatest cultural center in the planet, with Broadway, high fashion, five-star restaurants, amazing nightlife, and world-class museums. New York is also the world epicenter of media, has more headquarters of Fortune 500 companies than any other city in the world, and of course, New York is the home of the world's largest financial markets in Wall Street. New York has so much to offer, which is why those billionaires moved to New York from around the world. But if New York is so great, then why are people leaving in droves?
Yeah. But I want to point out that she's a socialist. She wants 10% tax rates. Those are both accurate, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Democratic, though.
Democratic socialist. Democratic socialist.
Very different.
Okay.
Very different.
Which doesn't work.
And it doesn't work for a very simple reason.
Right.
The people at the high end of the income scale don't just stand still to be sheared like sheep. They send their money overseas, as they're doing now. I was reading the other day about some company, that needs some money for expansion or whatever, and they have overseas branches. Now, they're making that money overseas, but they're borrowing money here instead of bringing it home. And they don't bring it home because it'll be taxed to death if they bring it home. Now, you keep raising the taxes, and they'll do more and more of their businesses overseas. And the jobs that are created will be created overseas. So this is not, whether they have high or low taxes on the rich, is going to affect the rich a lot less than it's going to affect people who are looking for jobs and people who have small businesses like hardware stores and whatnot who can't move overseas.
AOC and her Democratic Socialist friends have found a way to take the enormous amount of cultural capital that New York City took centuries to accumulate and then squander it within a single generation with bad political policies. Here's some examples. New York City is ranked as the worst city in the United States for retail. New York City is ranked as the second worst city in regards to affordability. New York City is ranked as the second worst city in the United States in which to retire. New York City has anything from the worst to the third worst tax climate of any city in the United States, depending on the methodology. This is the environment in which AOC is talking about her billionaire's tax.
New York has 119 billionaires, 119. They pay half of New York's tax liability already. Yeah. If you sock them with more bills, do you think they're going to stay?
So do we want these kind of, folks with helipads in the same city and the same society as people who are working 80-hour weeks and can't feed their kids?
And clearly the world is not a zero-sum game. So when someone creates wealth, when someone is wealthy, it can be, at least at times, because they created it, not because they swiped it from someone else. I think, you can think of someone like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs as a good example of that.
Attempts to spread their wealth are in fact spreading poverty.
Why?
Because you attack the people who are creating the most wealth, not only for themselves, but society. Don't forget, people don't get wealth just because they're greedy. They get wealth because other people voluntarily pay them their money. And they voluntarily part with their money only because they're getting something that they consider worth it.
It seems AOC's compassion is based more on resentment of the rich than for love of the poor. The Fox News anchor points out that these 119 billionaires, who are approximately 0.001% of the New York City population, are already paying more than half of the state income taxes of New York City. AOC acts as if rich people cause poor people to be poor. But there's no connection between the two because there's no fixed amount of wealth. One person having more wealth does not cause another person to have less wealth. Now let's see the oh-so-predictable results from the compassion of AOC's democratic socialism.
As you raise the taxes beyond some point, people who have high incomes simply send the income somewhere else, or else they go somewhere else. And so you can raise the tax rates as high as you want. The true millionaires and billionaires can have that money shipped to China or Germany or wherever, electronically inside of a minute.
Here's some stats for you. According to a report from New World Wealth and Webster Pacific, the combined wealth in Big Apple fell by $336 billion in the last 12 months, ending June 30th. Let me say that one more time. $336 billion. New York City's total wealth was valued at $2.66 trillion compared with $3 trillion during the same period. Now, a lot of people say, well, people lost money during the pandemic. Billionaires have gotten richer during the pandemic. Yes. We know that fact. It's been talked about everywhere. But New York officially got poorer during the same time by $336 billion. That's like saying 336 billionaires left town. That's like saying 3,360 people worth $100 million left town. That's like saying 33,600 people who live in New York who are worth $10 million skip town. That's not a small number. So now, tax collections in New York City dropped 46% in June.
They're not going to actually end up paying it. The people who are going to end up paying it is the guy who owns a local barber shop, the guy who owns a hardware store or a restaurant. He can't move to China. And who will pay the highest price of all are people who are looking for jobs, because the jobs will now be overseas where that money is, and they can't just hop a plane and go overseas and take the jobs.
After creating one of the worst business and tax environments in the entire United States, and with AOC threatened to make it even worse, many of those billionaires just took their money and left. This is especially true with the draconian lockdowns, Mayor de Blasio supporting the BLM and defund the police movements, and the predictable surge in violent crime as a direct consequence of that support. The poor and billionaires alike respond to both positive and negative incentives. Florida, under Governor DeSantis, has had a low tax policy, low crime rate, and almost no BLM rioting. Positive incentives. The exact opposite of AOC's democratic socialism of New York City. Negative incentives. Considering the differences of these incentives, let's see how this story ends.
Seeing a more permanent flight by the wealthy to from high-tax states. Of those moving from the Northeast to lower-tax states, 70% of its clients are going to Florida.
Leaving. You know where they're going? Do you know where most people in New York are going?
Florida.
Florida.
Yeah.
No state taxes, good weather, come on down.
And I say, you got to come back. When are you coming back? We'll go to dinner. I'll buy you a drink. Come over, I'll cook. They're not coming back right now. And you know what else they're thinking? If I stay there, they pay a lower income tax because they don't pay the New York City surcharge.
On a scale of 0 to some, how many do you give?
I think it's 0.
That's what I thought.
And what makes them tremendously dangerous is that facts that contradict what they believe are simply ignored or evaded.